And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo, and wow, I got a scary background. I feel like a character out of, I don't know, 1984. Is that Big Brother behind me taking a dump in the joint compound bucket? Is that what joint compound buckets are best for? Taking a dump? All right. I'm Paul DiRienzo. This is Let Them Talk. Welcome for another week. We got a great show in store. And of course, returning with the latest issue of The Shadow is the editor and publisher of The Shadow, Mr. Chris Flash himself. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, pleased to meet you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, great to have you back on the show. And of course, whenever it's time to have Chris Flash on again, you know there must be another copy of The Shadow out there.
That's true.
And for this is a new development in The Shadow, the history of The Shadow. After 60 issues, this is the 60th issue, and this is the first issue I can remember. Anyway, maybe you know better, but this is the first with any color on the cover.
That's true. This is the 60th issue of The Shadow. We've been publishing since March of 1989, and there's a reason why we're in color. First of all, I'm a purist about news. I believe news is not in color. I don't like mainstream newspapers that are in color. To me, news is black and white. You don't need color photographs, you don't need color print, you don't need like all kinds of bells and whistles. But we just so happened we got a friend of ours from the Bullet Space Gallery to run an ad, and he requested red and black on his ad. So since newspapers basically are one piece of paper on both sides here, we were able to give ourselves a front cover with some red. And what better thing to have in red but blood on the face of Donald Trump? So,
you mean Julius Caesar?
Well, I wouldn't even put him in the level of Julius Caesar. He's just a little scheming little weasel, and he just kind of weaseled his way to a very
that's pretty much
high
the
position.
Story.
At least Caesar had, strategies, battles, plans for the future. This guy is just a hustler and a schemer. Have you read his book, The Art of the Deal?
No, I haven't. I've interviewed the co-author who really wrote it.
It's well, yeah, of course, it was
Tony
ghostwritten. But the point is, just like with Mein Kampf, which was probably equally ghostwritten for Hitler, it reveals like Trump's mindset, how this guy's mind works, and he's just a hustler. Plain and simple.
He's a hustler, and he's a master of the big lie, which is basically you tell a lie over and over and over again.
Well, the big lie theory was Joseph Goebbels, Nazi propaganda minister, and he said the bigger the lie, the more easily it is believed. But the more you repeat your lie, you're correct. The more you repeat it, the more it gets into people's heads, and the more they accept it, and then they embrace it, and it becomes part of their life, and you cannot convince them otherwise.
There's so many lies this guy has told that fit the big lie. From the very beginning. I mean, the day to say I was at the inauguration, you were at the inauguration. I was actually there on Pennsylvania Avenue.
How'd you get through?
They let me right through. There
were pigs everywhere.
I got off the train. No, I'll tell you what happened. It's interesting, and we should get to the magazine, of course, the newspaper,
of course.
right? But it's an interesting anecdote. Is that I got off the bus just as the speech was starting. I could hear it from the bus station, the Bolt bus, the Chinatown bus. I got off the bus, the cheapest way you can get down to D.C., and I heard his voice echoing. And there was fences. You couldn't get down the street.
Right, there's mobile
erected fences. Right. And so I would start walking along the fence line, heading towards where the main protester area was, where I believed it was. And as I walked down a street and I came to a corner, there was sort of a airlock where you went through security to get into the area. And there was people blocking it, trying to protest and block it. And the police were doing everything they could to keep the people from blocking the door. And as I walked by the gate, and as I walked by, the cop says to me, "Aren't you going in?"
Wow.
Like he was so desperate. They didn't have to block it because nobody was going in.
Right.
So they were desperate to find somebody who would actually go in that
they
could
know
protect
who they're
from the demonstrators. Right.
God.
And so they pushed me through,
Funny.
and they looked at my bag, and there was a big paper bag inside my backpack, a big paper bag.
Was
and
it ticking?
No, in the paper bag was 6 sandwiches that I brought down with me. I was going to try and find a restaurant, and all that trouble in D.C., so I brought 6 sandwiches with me, and I had them wrapped up. So the lady who's going through the metal detector, opens up my bag, looks at the paper bag, and she goes, "Is that your lunch?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Okay." And she just zipped it up and gave it back to me.
Wow.
And then let me back in. And so I was in. Everyone was very nice to me. The police were very nice. And I guess I looked like a citizen, right? And I walked in to the area, and there was like nobody there. And most of the people, they were protesting. They were all like, dump Trump and pink hats, and they were holding signs.
The protesters definitely outnumbered the pro-Trump people.
They totally outnumbered them along the whole route.
And of course, typical media fashion, that was quickly
the nerve
misreported.
of him when he said that was like the largest I was at Nixon's inauguration in '73.
You're aging yourself, watch out.
I don't care. And I was 16 years old. My mother let me go. I begged and begged for weeks, so my mother let me go. And back then, there was even more demonstrators. There were more violent demonstrators. The police were not friendly at all. There was tear gas in the air. And there was still like a big crowd of pro-Nixon people. And the army and the police were basically keeping us apart from killing each other. And so this was very different feel to that, because there was a lot of protesters, but there weren't really that many Trump people. And I noticed that right from the beginning. And it made me think, this guy's a phoney. There's nothing really behind him.
It was really a hollow victory.
Literally he's a hollow man.
I could see like the footage of like almost the what do you call that? The mall. They call it the mall. That little strip of land, almost empty, 90% empty. It was so you heard echoing because there were no bodies to absorb the sound.
Yeah.
If the people had been attending,
you wouldn't
have heard the echoing. It was empty air.
It was empty, man. It was empty.
All the action was on the streets by Franklin Park.
I went to Franklin Park, and I heard later that he went riding, when Reagan was nominated, he actually was very, there's a history to it. When Carter wanted to show he was a man of the people, so he got out of the car and actually walked it, and there was hundreds of thousands of people around him. And when Reagan did it, he wanted to make a point that he was bringing back respect to the office, and he rode the whole way in a limo with cheering crowds around him. The two feuding sides of the parties, and this one was very unusual. That these other presidents, Democrat and Republican, had huge crowds, even when they were opposed to each other.
Did Trump walk?
No, he drove like 90 miles an hour. He didn't stop or act like there was anybody there at all.
Wow.
That's what adds the weirdness to the whole story, that there was all these people there. How would he know?
I feel like we're in a really surreal science fiction movie. We're not just watching it, but we're in it. It's a science fiction horror movie, and we're in it. And
with sirens going.
This is not good. It's still very surreal.
Yeah. It's the weirdest thing. It's like basically some sort of fascist dictator took over America. It seems that way.
Well, fascist figurehead anyway.
He's not strong enough to be a dictator. So, okay, so that means that's where we were hanging out at. So that is the roots of our interest in the shadow on
obviously,
Mr. Trump.
There's a takeoff on the Obama cover of Hope, and then you see a lot of
like a Shepard Fairey type of thing. For all I know, he did this. I don't know.
He could very well have, but I mean, it's a takeoff on the Obama thing, and some people have like modified, say nope. Some people have said, they got Obama dressed like a Rasta, and it's toque, all kinds of cool little like takeoffs. So we just found one. There's a couple of actual possibilities here, but we decided to go with dump, because if it's going to be out there on newsstands, we could have said some other more explicit thing than dump, but we compromised with dump.
Right, people don't
and
like
it reminds
that
of Trump, so it's good. Dump Trump.
Yeah, right.
It's clear, dump Trump. So
it's a dump. We did an art show where we did a whole thing about murd, like that Trump is dump. Trump is that like a dump? Take a dump. All right, so I think that's the idea. So we're from New York. We know Donald Trump. He's not a mystery to us. We know he's a crook. We know that, I don't know if he's a crook per se, but let's put it this way. He manipulated the law in order to benefit greatly for his own personal behavior and his own personal wealth. And in that manipulating of the law, at one point, is it okay to pay no taxes because you're a scheming little, rich guy?
Well, the thing is, you can't,
who just
you can't tell the American public that you pay no taxes and expect them to pay taxes.
He doesn't want them. No, he doesn't want people to pay taxes.
Well,
he'll cut them. He'll cut taxes to nothing, but then you'll have no services, except for the military. The military will get everything.
Right. Well, 16 years of Afghanistan and not one. Where are the war demonstrations? Where's the war movement? Where's anyone doing anything about it?
He's a liar, because he once said that it was too low taxes. He volunteered in his career that taxes be increased by 50%. He volunteered that marijuana should be legal. His number one guy, this Roger Stone guy who's behind him 100%, who's got a picture of Nixon on his back. He's a big pot smoker, man.
All hypocrites. All hypocrisy. So. Anyway, you did a really good piece actually in this issue of The Shadow about Trump and the Russians, and most people think that Trump and Russians stole the election, hacked the election. That's a bunch of bull. Okay, right. The reality is Americans are perfectly capable of stealing their own election, just like they always have in the past. No matter what, Americans are good at stealing their own elections. You should read reports here by Greg Palast, who really talks about voter fraud in depth.
Right. that the guy that they just put ahead of that voter commission,
Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State of Kansas.
The last shadow he talked about, and this shadow he's talking about.
Chris Kobach said something called cross-check, which Greg Palast readily exposes. GregPalast.com has a lot more of it too, but we have a lot of Greg Palast reports here.
Yes.
And he explains how
There's Palast and Kobach together over there.
I mean, in a nutshell, can I explain real quick?
Yeah, you should.
A guy named Joe Jackson in Mississippi, who may have had a felony, they equate him with the same Joseph Jackson in Missouri, and they say it's the same guy, so they delete every Joseph Jackson across the U.S. They delete blacks, Hispanics, and Asians. They purge the voter rolls, and that's one way they steal the election. You don't need Russians to hack anything. You don't need Russians to leak Hillary emails. This is a theft of an election, American style. Now he's appointed, now that he's in, he's appointed Chris Kobach, who's seen here with Greg Palast being interviewed, being grilled by Greg Palast, who's one of the rare, truly investigative journalists that we know of. Him and John Pilger are two good examples. Kobach is now in charge of something called the Voter Integrity Commission. He's asked all of the secretaries of state of states to give their voter records to his commission so they can decide who's a legitimate voter for the 2020 election. Publicly, they're telling CNN, oh, there's no way in hell we're giving those records out. But what Greg Palast reveals here, which we print in the shadow, is that when they gave those public speeches about refusing to meet Kobach's request to give the voter information, they already had secretly behind the scenes. So they lied to the media. Oh, we'll never give that information out.
So they lied again. We're talking about everything this guy talks about is a lie. And
lie.
Lie.
They're already working on stealing the 2020 election right now.
Yeah.
That's what they're working on doing right now.
Right.
And they're going to purge the voter rolls even further.
Right.
So that's a good story in the shadow.
Excellent.
You might want to read. You know, I added this up. We got 22 stories in the shadow, plus 4 pages of original artwork by a world-renowned artist, Seth Tabachman.
Great. Seth is great.
It's 4 pages of original artwork by Seth Tabachman. He's a world-renowned artist.
There it is, yeah.
You're getting 22 pages plus 4 pages of art for only $1. That's a pretty good deal.
Called rigged. It's a history of rigged elections in America, right? The whole history of rigged elections and how it's related to slavery and things like that.
Yeah, we got a very sad obituary on Lynn Stewart, who was a radical law warrior, and she was so amazing and such a beautiful soul, beautiful person. Her husband, Ralph, wrote a piece.
Right.
Her former partner, Stanley Cohen, wrote a piece. It's really wonderful to get both perspectives.
And a new Down by Law. Speaking of lawyers, like the great people's lawyer Lynn Stewart, you have who's our friend who's been on Let Them Talk numerous times and on my WBAI show, Trump Watch, David Thompson, who's a big activist lawyer for the.
He wrote this wonderful piece
Black
about his
Lives Matter
adventures with Black Lives Matter and other civil rights issues. He wrote this wonderful piece about his dealings with the NYPD on getting them to comply with a law pertaining to releasing information by way of the Freedom of Information Law, which the cops lie about. So the cops, on one hand, will tell the judge, well, we can't give that information out because Black Lives Matter is the same as ISIS, and we give that information out, we'd be feuding terrorism. They said this. He showed me the transcript. It's sick. And then he'll sue, and then the NYPD will respond to the suit. Well, we don't have that information. So on one hand, we can't give it out because it'll help ISIS. On the other hand, we don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
They're full of crap. So Seth did this nice little piece of art here with a cop with a forked tongue. This nice little
cop with a forked tongue.
Yeah, let's get a little messy here.
Hold it out like this. Let's give everybody a good view.
So Seth Tabachman did this original piece here with the cop with the forked tongue, and that kind of illustrates how the cops are just totally liars.
Right.
What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, that's good. You don't. Sorry, that's great. I just wanted to remind folks that a lot of what I talk about anyway, my Pirate Politics piece, you can hear more on my radio show, which is every Thursday at 6:30 on WBAI. Trump Watch with Paul DiRienzo. So if you're not near TV but near radio, it's 6:30 p.m. this Thursday, and the following Thursday, you can follow my radio show, which parallels and has a lot of the same material that's in the shadow.
You're one of the best things about BAI. I mean, your
back
show
at BAI
reminds us what BAI used to be like when it was at its total strength.
And now it's sort of having problems. That's what
it needs to recover. It hopefully can, but it's tough. It's
a tough situation. So BI. So then, and also you can. I'm running a couple of podcasts on. You can get my show Trump Watch with Paul DiRienzo on iTunes, and you can get it on SoundCloud. So if you have Apple iTunes, you can just type in Paul DiRienzo or Trump Watch, and it pops right up, and you can subscribe to it and get every show sent to your inbox. So. We're all involved in media, people's media, man. We're still doing people's media for all these years.
If we don't do independent media, whether it's radio, this cable show, or doing a shadow, we don't have independent media. We don't have real news. If you depend on mainstream media to mess with your head and feed you your opinion and then get you to be conditioned to accept what the public, what the government's going to do next,
Yeah.
then you're really just a robot. You're a sheep. You have to think for yourself and have your own media. If you can't do it yourself, at least support the underground or alternative media as you see it.
Where can people get this newspaper, The Shadow?
Well, there's
Where
several
can they get The
locations.
Shadow?
You could get The Shadow at least 9 locations on the Lower East Side right now. We're about to distribute further outside of New York City. But I can quickly run them by you. There's Gem Spa Newsstand at St. Mark's and 2nd Avenue. There's East Village Books at 99 St. Mark's. There's Blue Stockings Books, 162 Allen Street. There's Ink, which I believe is 50 Avenue B. It's on Avenue B between 4th and 5th Streets. There's a bicycle shop on East 13th, 530 East 13th Street called CC Cyclery. Oh goodness, what other locations? Unoppressive Anti-Imperialist Books on 34 Carmine Street. That's about
That's Lower Manhattan. But
Lower Manhattan. And also Word Up Books on Amsterdam Avenue by I think 145th Street, and Sisters Uptown Books. You can look them up and find those places. We do not go to Revolution Books because Revolution Books is this right-wing psycho cult run by wannabe revolutionaries who create phony groups to pretend they're fighting the government or fighting the latest war, and they're really trying to recruit you into their fold. So we don't sell at Revolution Books because they're not revolutionary at all.
Oh, because you don't want to be part in case they use it to recruit or something
Well,
like that.
Sisters Books, we don't want to encourage readers to come into that store to get a shadow and then get sucked into their little mind control group. Sisters Books is an African-American female-run bookstore, legitimate neighborhood bookstore. Word Up is an Hispanic neighborhood bookstore, and have events, and they have real people from the neighborhood acting as volunteers. That's a grassroots effort to run a real bookstore, like Blue Stockings on Allen Street.
And that's the story behind The Shadow, really. I mean, The Shadow. How did The Shadow begin?
It's a grassroots effort started by people who were, let's say, victims of the police riot in Tompkins Square Park on August 6th, 1988. And luckily for us,
Coming up to the anniversary, right?
Actually,
the
we are.
29th anniversary.
Luckily, we had a
30
large
years,
number
yeah.
of politically minded artists, writers, photographers, and reporters who wanted to see some proper coverage of the riot and also other news stories of the day that the mainstream media was totally either misreporting or underreporting or ignoring.
Right.
And so we filled that void in 1989, early 89, and we've been doing it ever since.
And of course, I was going to say, because when you talk about the riot at Tompkins Square Park and all those struggles, I think of our good friend who just passed, David Peel.
It's another sad obituary.
Died,
One of the saddest things about putting that The Shadow is we have to do these obituaries of fallen comrades and friends, really good friends. David Peel was like an over-the-top, politically active musician. He was there for all of our demos, just about all of our demos.
Oh, yeah.
If the demo was like kind of stagnating and there's a standoff between us and the riot cops, Dave would come along, whip out the guitar and start singing. Now we have this huge sing-along, and the cops can't sing to each other, so we're singing to each other. And we're singing Die Up You Scum and
He had all these great songs.
Oh, great songs, and all original out of his amazingly fertile mind. And the marijuana is one, but there's a Here Comes a Cop, he's got a gun, he's after me, he's after you, Die Up You Scum, great stuff, and
Great.
all, like liberating, and it was like so cool, and it's such a sad thing to see.
A real neighborhood fixture.
Yeah.
Right. And a veteran as well, so anybody...
A veteran of neighborhood battles.
Right, and a veteran of the U.S.
there.
military. He was a U.S. military veteran.
He was in the military.
He worked in computers.
Oh,
in
really?
The Army. Yeah. And he always, in the days of punch cards. Well, that's what your story says.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right,
That's
that's
true.
what your
That's true.
story
He was a
says.
computer guy.
Kwame.
That's right.
Koshek's story.
So,
so that's great. So, all right. And so the Shadow's got it's a combination sort of national, international, and local news. I mean, all sort of put together.
it's a good recipe.
A lot of
because
stuff
nobody,
about the local housing scene and stuff, and gentrification. And
well,
those kind of
especially
things.
the East Harlem. That seems to be the really hot area that the city's going after, and they're trying to rezone East Harlem. They rezone the rest of Manhattan, and it's one of the last exploited areas. That and other parts of Harlem and Brooklyn and Bronx, they haven't been totally exploited yet. But the city's working their way to the outer boroughs. It's not enough to completely gentrify the island of Manhattan. They want it all. So they're working their way out, like what's that movie, Steve McQueen, that gooey thing, The Glob. Was it The
Blob.
The Blob. And it just kind of spreads, and you have to get away from it, otherwise you'll get consumed by it.
Right.
And they're just slowly but surely taking every inch, and it starts with rezoning to allow for higher density housing in areas where maybe the limit was 3 stories, 4 stories high. And once you've rezoned the area, immediately the real estate values skyrocket. They artificially hyperinflate, and then developers come in, and then the city allows them to build some gigantic skyscrapers, some crazy shit, and it pushes people out of the neighborhood. And it's a
So that's the
insidious
connection
process
to Donald
facilitated
Trump.
by the city.
Donald Trump and all of his friends, all of these, where it's Howard Lorber, Donald Trump, all these different companies, all these real estate investors, Harry Helmsley, Leona Helmsley, Kushner, in our neighborhood is Kushner, he's operating there.
The funny thing is, they even in the old days, in the 80s and 90s, when it was starting to hyperinflate, they weren't really doing it on the scale that it's happening now.
Right.
Now it's a total city for sale.
Well, who would have thought that what started out, and we talked about the riot in Tompkins Square Park in order to save our neighborhood from gentrification, would snowball over 30 years into a battle for the heart and soul of America and American democracy.
It's actually happening all over the country too. If you go to like places, I used to love San Francisco, and I haven't been there in a long time, but the gentrification has taken place there as well. And it's basically every town. And when I talk to friends from like the past and about the town they're in, and the same thing's happening. The hyper-gentrification is taking place all over the country. Who the hell's paying for this hyper-inflated real estate? The hyper-inflated rents. Who can afford it? Who's paying it? And as long as they're willing to pay it, it will continue to hyperinflate.
Turns out it might be. You see, a lot of people talk about Russians.
It's unsustainable.
Russians, they talk about the Russians as if like the road from Trump leads to Moscow. But did anybody ever think
this is
that
homegrown
the road
fascism.
might lead from Trump to some place like Brighton Beach or upstate New York, or some of these other places.
Here's one thing you got to realize: when the mainstream media is telling you something, right? They're obviously trying to get you to feel or process information a certain way in order to give you a certain opinion or feeling about something. Yeah. They're very slick about it. They're much more high tech than they ever used to be.
Connections with the mafia.
You immediately have to question: why are they telling me this? Why are they telling me this way? What are they trying to get me to think or feel? And then realize what the real story must be based on the way they're telling you the lie.
So your reading of American history, did you think it was possible, as it's come to be very probable, that organized crime and the mob would actually take over the government of the United States? And
they probably did so as earlier than, Truman. It probably goes back as far as Truman, I would say, maybe even before Truman.
Lucky Luciano and those guys who were involved in the OSS.
They cut a deal. They cut a deal with FDR to support him for president.
Yeah,
and then he reneged. He reneged on the deal. And then Roosevelt was in an open touring car with the mayor of Chicago. Some guy came running up to the car and shot them both. He missed Roosevelt, hit the mayor.
Cermak, I think.
I forget the guy's name. But in my heart, I believe they were shooting Roosevelt for dissing the mafia, like they got Kennedy later for reneging on his promises to the mafia and to the military.
Right, because Cuba, when Cuba fell to Castro and Kennedy didn't do anything to get it back, the mob lost billions from the casino
But
business.
Truman was involved in a mafia of his own, homegrown in Montana. What was
Missouri.
it? Missouri, thank you. And I think every president.
You mean a haberdasher in the mafia? I mean, that's
He was given his senatorial position by I guess the organized political machine of his town, and they were their own sort of mafia. I wouldn't say Italian mafia, but their own little mafia.
The mob. I call it the mob.
Right.
All mobbed up.
Who could be the first mafia president? Would that be Nixon? Would it be Kennedy? Would it be?
Right.
Would it be
Kennedy?
Johnson?
If Kennedy was shot by by the mob, they think that the mobsters of New Orleans and Miami, Trafficante, and I forget the guy's name offhand in New Orleans.
Nixon could really be the first mafia president. It could be argued that Nixon would be.
LBJ came to power, and then Nixon followed him, and so that would have been a direct connection from the mob hit on Kennedy and the rise of Nixon. And Nixon was very connected to those aspects of organized labor.
Well, Nixon got put in by the Bush people and also by the Rockefellers. So they're all like intertwined, like.
You're saying the mob and the Secret Service and the OSS and the CIA and Russian intelligence are all connected together, right?
I think they're all on the same team. No matter what you see, brand A, brand B, brand C, they're all connected. There was a real big joke in the old days in Lower East Side. All these Indian restaurants would be in the same block, right? 10 Indian restaurants. The big joke was one gigantic underground kitchen. And they all got their food from the one kitchen. No matter how many restaurants you saw, there was no real variety. It's the same food, same kitchen. And
57 varieties of the same thing.
You can apply that to this. It could be argued that the Rockefellers and company created the Soviet Union and then created a phony enemy against us to justify military buildup, to create a phony Cold War for political repression in the United States. There's a million different benefits, a million different facets of benefits by creating the very enemy that pretends to call for your demise. So you control that enemy. They'll never be effective. You're in control. You're playing both sides of the coin against each other. And you got people in the United States, people in the Soviet Union, and they all argue forever. I'm a commie. I'm not a commie. I hate the commies. And they're fighting each other. Meanwhile, the people on the top are laughing all the way to the bank. They control all the world resources, finances, everything, and they're just laughing at you, looking down at you, laughing at you. And they keep doing the same thing. I believe the same thing.
What do we do? How do we stop this ugly cycle
we
represented
can't
by
We can't do a revolution.
our dear New York, fellow New Yorker.
We can't do a revolution. We can't throw the bastards out as much as they deserve to be put out. The best I can do with my friends and allies, including yourself, is to publish an underground newspaper, try to educate and wise up as many people as possible, in my own little way, our own little way, and at least spread awareness. I think the first step toward positive social change is spreading awareness. The more people you can enlighten, the more hope you have for
How can
collective
people
result.
get a copy of this newspaper if they are not on the Lower East Side or near one of the stores around
I'm
the
glad
country?
you asked that, Paul.
There he goes.
You can get the Shadow by sending us $2.50. Unfortunately, it costs $1.50 in postage, $1.60 in postage to mail a $1 issue of the Shadow. If you send us $2.50 by money order or $25 by money, we'll send you the next 10 issues of the Shadow by first class mail. The Shadow address is P.O. Box 20298, and it's New York, New York, and the zip is 1009. Again, P.O. Box 20298, New York, New York, zip 1009. And you can also email us at sorry, I'm not using my marbles here. shadowpress@rocketmail.com. If you email us at shadowpress@rocketmail.com and turn us on to any store that you may know in your area, because I'm sure this show is seen way
All
outside
over
of
the
New York
world.
City. Please turn us on to local
It's 9 a.m.
shops.
in Manila in the Philippines right now,
Nice.
where people are watching
Local
us.
hip locations that might sell an underground newspaper on consignment. It would help us a lot to get better distributed. We don't make any money in the Shadow. We will never make money in the Shadow. The purpose of the Shadow is not to make money, but rather to spread awareness and try to break even as much as we can.
Duterte is this fascist leader of the Philippines, and maybe our friends in Manila can order a stack of Shadows to distribute.
Before the internet, before all this like computerized BS,
this is the real thing. This is paper. We're not saying go on the internet and download these
We
articles.
used to mail Shadows to 47 different countries. We had the anarchists in Israel asking us to send them Shadows. We had anarchists in Mexico asking us to send them Shadows. And it's amazing how many like bags and bags of Shadows we would mail all over the place, like hundreds and hundreds of issues. And now with the internet, we are working on our website. It'll be shadowpress.net when it gets online. We're still constructing it. But nothing, like you said, beats having a newspaper in your hand, something you can feel.
Some ink.
It resonates. It stays in. You can pass it on to a friend. You can read. You can refer to it later. It goes in your library. It's information. Your brain processes information differently when you see it in the form of print rather than
You can
light
read
on a
it in
screen.
unusual circumstances, like in the bathroom or something.
And a
like
computer
the
can
old days.
crash, but this can't crash. Short of having it burned
Right.
or getting it soaking wet, this really can't crash. It's gonna
25
be
seconds
there
to
for you.
go. What are you going to tell people where to get this paper?
Okay, quickly on the lower. Well, first of all, again, if you don't mind my repeating, I don't mean to be crass. P.O. Box 20298, New York, New York 1009, Shadow Press, and also shadowpress@rocketmail.com. Please feel free
Right.
to
And you
email
go
us.
to GemSpot
If you've
Lower
got
East
stories
Side.
you want to write something for us or contribute something to us, please turn us on.
5 seconds.
Okay, GemSpot Newsstand, 2nd Avenue, St. Mark's, Blue Stockings Books on
Thank
Allen
you, Chris.
Street. And